The music stopped abruptly on the luxury cruise ship in the middle of the ocean. The wind howled, waves crashed, sending white foam flying across the deck. Lights flickered as the storm swept through. Amid the passengers' panic, a shadow appeared. Armed men had boarded the ship. Screams and cries tore through the air. And in all that chaos, one woman in a service uniform sat still, her eyes fixed on the sea, calm in a way no one could understand. Why did she remain silent amid the storm and the barrels of guns? Keep watching to learn the truth. If you believe in these values, subscribe and stand with humankind's stories. Far off the horizon, dark clouds were rolling in, heavy as if a steel curtain was about to fall over the sea. The wind whistled long and hard, whipping foam waves against the Aurora hull. But on the main deck, no one cared. The sound of live jazz still carried from the band, laughter and clinking glasses drowning out every warning of the danger drawing closer. Aurora, the pride of the cruise industry, blazed like a floating city. The banquet hall displayed crystal liquor counters, red carpets stretched along the aisles, and chandeliers on the ceiling reflecting golden light. People draped themselves in the arrogance of those chasing glory, crisp suits, dazzling gowns, smug smiles. Among the crowd were faces that stood out. A middle-aged businessman with a bulging stomach, a deep red tie choking his neck, bragged endlessly about million-dollar deals, his voice louder than the music. The woman beside him, dressed in a tight red gown, laughed shrilly whenever her eyes swept over the service staff, her gaze laced with disdain. At the table by the window, a little boy in a tiny suit sat quietly, a glass of orange juice in hand. His wide eyes studied every detail, the lights, the waves, and the woman bending down to pick up a napkin at a guest's feet. Elena. Her white blouse was old, her apron stained with faded marks, and her soft shoes were silent on the floor. The metal name tag glimmered faintly in the golden light. Elena, service crew. In this dazzling world, she was nothing more than a shadow. A napkin slipped to the floor. Elena bent to pick it up. Laughter erupted from the businessman's table, mingled with mocking whispers. The woman in red smirked, murmured something, and the group burst into louder laughter. To them, the scene was more entertaining than the stage show. Elena did not reply, but as she bent down, her finger brushed the scratched silver bracelet on her wrist. A tiny gesture, almost unconscious. Her eyes flicked briefly over the crowd, so fast it was almost invisible. She did not look at those who laughed or sneered. She was counting every face, every pathway, every space between the banquet tables. Then she returned to her old posture, quiet and unseen. Another service worker, younger, froze for a moment when he saw Elena folding tablecloths. Her movements were too quick, too precise, like a machine trained 1,000 times. But Elena said nothing, only continued working. Meanwhile, the little boy kept staring. The curious eyes of a child saw what the adults ignored. The way her hand tightened on the bracelet, the way her step never faltered, even as the ship's floor quivered under the waves. He sipped his orange juice quietly and said nothing to his mother, but his gaze never left the woman. Outside, the dark clouds drew closer. A blast of wind rushed into the hall through the open door, shaking the curtains. The first drops of rain splattered on the glass. Some passengers frowned, ordering more wine to drown out their unease. But Elena tilted her head slightly, eyes fixed on the dark sea. The storm was no surprise to her. It was a reminder. Tonight, Aurora would not be just another luxurious voyage. The wind shifted, whistling along the ship's hull. Aurora shuddered, the chandelier swayed gently, scattering trembling streaks of light across the ceiling. The music still played, but now sounded misplaced. A few passengers turned their heads toward the windows. The horizon had been swallowed by a mass of thick black clouds. Waves rose high, slamming hard against the hull. The first jolt threw many from their seats. Glasses toppled, wine spilling red across white cloth like blood. The woman in the red dress screamed, clinging to the businessman's arm. He scowled, more irritated than afraid, shouting at the staff as if even the weather could be bribed. Amid the chaos, Elena walked calmly down the aisle. Each step was grounded on the slick wooden floor. The silver tray in her hand trembled but did not spill. When the gust tore the curtains open, she tilted her head, eyes cast toward the darkness offshore. Those eyes weren't just watching the storm, they were listening. There was something in the thunder, dry, sharp, unnatural, and then it came. Small boats emerged from the curtain of rain, flashlights slicing like wolves' fangs. Engines roared, metal clanged. Muscular figures in masks, weapons in hand, hooks biting into Aurora's sides. In a heartbeat, the music cut out. Screams took their place. Pirates swarmed the deck, their boots steady on the rain-slick floor. The leader stripped off his raincoat, revealing a coiled snake tattoo on his arm, lips curling in a faint smile, the smile of someone accustomed to watching others tremble. He did not need to shout. One raised hand was enough. His crew spread instantly, rifles sweeping across the crowd. One man crackled commands into a radio. Panic exploded. A mother clutched her child, sobbing. The loud businessman now trembled violently, sweat pouring like rain. He shoved a service worker forward, shouting for protection. The woman in red collapsed onto the floor, hands shaking as she covered her head. Someone dared to resist. A middle-aged man, jacket torn at the shoulder, pushed his young son behind him, standing as a shield. But a pirate lunged, fist cracking against his face, slamming him to the floor. Blood streaked his cheek. The boy screamed, clinging to his father. Another young man pulled out his phone, snapping a photo in secret. The flash burst. Within a second, he was yanked from his seat, thrown to the ground, and his phone was crushed under a heavy boot. The crowd was no longer uniform. Some whispered prayers, lips trembling. Others hid their faces. Some only wept. And a few eyes burned with anger, desperate to find someone else to sacrifice. Elena was shoved forward. A rough hand from a passenger gripped her shoulder, dragging her to the front, throwing her like a living shield before the barrels. A voice hissed from behind. "Stand still. At least you can be useful for once." The passengers shrank back, leaving Elena alone, facing the open steel doors. The pirate leader's rifle swept across, halting at a young woman's forehead. She choked, hands trembling violently against her face. Elena did not move. She set her silver tray down on the table's edge. Her eyes scanned the hall, measuring distance, noting positions, marking corners, exits, even the knife strapped to a pirate's belt. Her feet shifted apart, her weight settling low, nothing like the clumsy worker she seemed to be. Outside, the storm roared. Inside, the breath of hundreds was shattered in fear. And among them, one figure stood straight, silent, as if waiting for a signal no one else could hear. Elena knew this was only the beginning, and the real storm, not of the sea, but of the Aurora itself, was just about to break. The wind howled through the gaps, carrying the thick scent of salt into the air. On the main deck, everyone was frozen in panic. The young woman still had a gun barrel pressed to her forehead, her whole body trembling. One squeeze of the trigger, and blood would stain the wooden floor. Elena stood only a few steps away. Her hair was soaked, plastered to her cheek. Her eyes narrowed slightly as if calculating. Rain poured down, drumming heavy beats against the silver tray she had just set down. Then, in the brief instant when lightning split the sky, Elena moved. Her hand nudged the tray, letting it slide along the stream of rainwater on the floor. Not loud, not rushed, just enough for the tray to slam hard against the steel wall. The sound rang out in the narrow hall like a hammer striking an eardrum. The pirate flinched. His finger froze on the trigger. The woman in front of him collapsed to the ground, spared in the nick of time. No one understood what had just happened. Only Elena still standing in place, her eyes flicking toward the gunman. In that glance was a clear intent. He hesitated. A flash of doubt slipped into his icy stare. A little boy, the same one with the glass of orange juice, stared wide-eyed, his small hand gripping his mother's. He whispered, trembling, "Mom, she did it on purpose." The mother blinked, turned to Elena, and saw something different in the servant woman for the first time. Time. The air shifted. A few passengers began to notice too. Now torn, the woman in the red gown whispered to the man beside her, "She's not what we thought." Contempt slowly gave way to unease. Another pirate stepped toward Elena, swinging his gun to threaten her. She did not back away, nor meet him head-on. Instead, she shifted a step to the right, positioning herself neatly in the flickering shadow of the failing light. The barrel tracked her, but in the split second, the light blinked out, and then, again, he had to squint. Elena had already leaned aside, throwing off his rhythm. He growled but didn't fire. Just a slight movement, yet enough to unsettle him. Enough for his comrades to exchange glances, realizing this woman was no predictable prey. Then another lightning flash. Her wet hair clung back in the white blaze, revealing a thin scar from her left jawline to her ear. Usually hidden, it stood out, proof of days far from safety. A passenger pressed against the wall and froze. He recognized that scar, once seen in a faint news report about a failed harbor raid years ago. The news had said the lone survivor had perished, but the eyes in the scar before him were identical. Elena betrayed no emotion. She lifted her chin slightly, tucking her hair behind her ear, as if nothing unusual was happening. Yet the gesture only exposed the scar more. It was a wordless, vague yet powerful message. She was not who they thought she was. The crowd wavered. Fear still clung tight, but now mixed with doubt, even hope. If she was not just a service worker, then who was she? Outside, waves still battered the hull. Inside, no one knew that the moment the tray struck steel, a new line had been crossed. From here on, Elena was no longer just an invisible shadow. She had planted the seed of another truth in both the crowd and her enemies. A truth not yet named. The storm off the coast roared violently. The Aurora tilted hard to one side, rain and blood merging into streams along the corridor. Passengers screamed, clinging to chairs, to each other. In the chaos, the pirate leader clutched his weapon tighter, dragging a woman out onto the deck, pressing the gun to her temple. Elena's eyes flashed. She knew if she hesitated another second, that hostage's life would be over. A lightning bolt ripped across the sky. In the blinding white light, Elena sprang forward. Her twist was fluid as water. Her left hand snatched a broken wine bottle nearby and hurled it straight at the gunman's face. Glass shattered with a thunderous crack. He staggered. The trigger jerked, the bullet grazing the hostage's shoulder and sparking off the steel wall. Elena closed in before the pirates could react, driving her elbow into his wrist. The gun flew free, clattering across the floor. But before relief could settle, another pirate lunged from the shadows, blade slashing across. The hiss of steel cut the air. Elena swerved, but the knife still skimmed her shoulder, tearing her shirt, leaving a burning line of pain. She gritted her teeth, breath faltering for a beat. Blood seeped into her apron, but her eyes did not waver. She spun, using the butt of the dropped gun to smash the attacker's temple. He collapsed, knife clattering away. A scream erupted from the crowd. Some passengers covered their faces, sobbing. Others stood, shouting encouragement, as if a fragile flame of hope had just been lit. The little boy with the orange juice clutched his mother's hand, his gaze locked on Elena's figure. The leader roared in fury. He signaled. Two more pirates circled wide, flanking Elena. One swung a rifle, the other gripped an iron bar. Elena stepped back half a pace, eyes scanning swiftly. In one short breath, she picked her target. She darted left, flipping a dining table over. Chairs crashed down, blocking the line of fire. The one with the iron bar lunged. Elena absorbed the blow with her arm, pain jolting to the bone, but she held her ground. Her foot pivoted, knee driving upward into his gut. He collapsed, sprawled on the wet floor. The rifleman fired. The bullet whistled past her ear, splintering wood. Elena rolled across the floor, sliding through the water, then swung upward. A sharp strike of the gun butt smashed his wrist. Metal clattered onto the slick deck. The hall held its breath. Those who had mocked her, shoved her out as a shield, now stared wide-eyed, mouths stammering without sound. The leader now had only a handful of men left. But he did not run. He locked eyes with Elena, fury mixed with suspicion carved into his gaze. He stepped forward slowly, gun raised, his voice rough. "You are not a service worker." Elena stood on the slick floor, blood dripping steadily down her arm, her breathing ragged. Yet her back stayed straight. Her eyes locked on his, no words needed. Her silence was its own answer. The passengers watched, struck dumb. The rescued woman collapsed, clutching Elena's apron, unable to speak through tears. Elena gave a slight nod, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder, a silent comfort. The leader squeezed the trigger but didn't fire yet. Another lightning flash lit the scar on Elena's jaw, the silver bracelet glinting. He faltered, as if recognizing a ghost from memory. In that instant, the truth could no longer be hidden. Elena was not invisible. She was not an ordinary worker. She was an undercover operative, forged in the shadows, now stepping into the storm's light. A warrior woman, bearing an old silver bracelet on her wrist, and in her eyes, a strength no one had ever expected. The storm still churned offshore, but on Aurora's main deck, the air felt stretched to the breaking point. Passengers were utterly silent, eyes fixed on two figures facing each other. Elena, arms still bleeding, gaze like ice, and the pirate leader, his gun trembling slightly in his hand. Wind hissed through steel seams, carrying the smell of salt and rust. The silver bracelet on Elena's wrist glinted in a flash of lightning, and when the light died, her eyes closed a fraction, pulling a wave of memory up from deep inside. She saw herself at 12, standing on a fog-laced pier, her father in a worn naval uniform, his face weathered by the sea. He knelt, slipped the silver bracelet from his wrist, and placed it in her palm. "The sea does not forgive, daughter, but you must learn to forgive. Keep the light for others, even if the waves take me away." That was the last time Elena saw him. His ship vanished in a night storm, never to return. The silver bracelet became the only tether left, turning loss into a vow. Another lightning flash cracked the sky. Elena opened her eyes. The old pain was no longer a wound, but a hidden flame guiding every step. She lowered her gun. The crowd stared, stunned. In a life-or-death instant, an operative chose to let go of her weapon. But in her eyes was a power greater than any barrel. Elena strolled, rain running along the cut on her arm, merging with the blood pooled at her feet. She moved toward the leader, neither hurried nor afraid. He tensed, tightened the trigger, but did not fire. His gaze wavered, as if something in Elena held him fast. She stopped a few paces away, turning her wrist so the bracelet caught the light. Her voice made no sound, but her actions said everything. She fought not to destroy, but to protect. The woman who had just escaped death crawled backwards, gripping her daughter's hand. They looked at Elena through tears. A middle-aged man with a torn shoulder jacket forced himself upright, pushing his son behind him, his eyes no longer contemptuous but full of gratitude. The leader looked at Elena, and something cracked in his eyes. What did he see there? Perhaps the image of an older sister lost in a storm long ago, who had also worn an old silver bracelet. A buried memory surged, and his hand began to shake beyond his control. The gun lowered. The hostage was released, collapsing into the arms of other passengers. Sobs rose, mingling with the wind. Elena did not smile, did not bask in pride. She only placed a hand on the woman's shoulder, drawing her behind, then turned back to face the leader. He recognized a truth in her eyes. Some people fight not for glory, but a quiet promise. The remaining pirates hesitated. They looked at their chief, then at Elena. For the first time, fear showed in their eyes. Not fear of death, but fear that they had lost their way. A long silence. Then, as if something inside had snapped, the leader stepped back, his gun dropping to the floor. The clang of metal on steel echoed, ending the suffocating tension. Passengers broke down, not in cheers, but in tears pent up through the long night. Many looked at Elena, hearts heavy with regret for ever having despised her. Elena tightened her grip on the bracelet. Her father had not returned, but tonight at least, no one would suffer the same loss she had. As the wind eased, Aurora still drifted, and on the deck, a quiet truth carved itself deep. Strength does not lie in weapons. It lies in a promise kept to the very end. Dawn slowly opened after the chaotic night. The sky was still mottled with gray, but the first light fell across the water, silvering the still growling waves. Aurora, the ship, pitched like a leaf in the storm, now drifted slowly, mottled with blood, broken wood, and shattered glass. It stood firm, though no longer whole. On the main deck, passengers emerged from their hiding places. They helped one another, eyes swollen, clothes soaked through. No more arrogant laughter, no more jeers, only heavy looks, as if they had passed through birth and death. The young woman who had nearly been shot clutched her daughter, sobbing. The middle-aged man with the torn jacket bent to pick up his wooden cane, then gripped his little boy's hand. The child stayed silent, eyes fixed on the empty space where Elena had stood. But she was no longer there. A crew member whispered. As the rescue ship drew near, he'd glimpsed a woman tying a line and quietly climbed a ladder over the side. No one had time to call out. The morning mist swallowed her shape whole. Silence stretched over the crowd. Some passengers bowed their heads, murmuring prayers. A man, the very businessman who'd been so arrogant the night before, stooped to pick up a sodden, torn scrap of uniform left on the floor. He clenched it in his fist, eyes wet, as if trying to redeem the moment he had scorned her. The orange juice boy looked up at his mother. His voice was small but sure. "Mom, she wasn't a server. She's the one who saved everyone." The mother held him, tears running, unable to answer. In the distance, the rescue ship's horn echoed across the quiet sea. Aurora was no longer alone. Passengers waved in relief, but knew the truth in their hearts. They had survived not only because help arrived, but because an unnamed woman chose to stand when everyone else knelt. Sunlight pushed the dark clouds away. The last rays fell across a puddle on the floor, reflecting the image of a silver bracelet as it lived on in the memories of those who had seen it. No one held that bracelet now, but they would remember its flash as a reminder. Sometimes heroes appear in the most ordinary forms. No titles, no fanfare, no victory song. Only a promise is kept, and action is taken immediately. Aurora continued on, carrying people who had changed. And somewhere, in the thin morning mist over the brightening sea, perhaps Elena was already moving toward another assignment. Some heroes don't need names, because true worth isn't in fame, but in action. If you believe in these values, stand by humankind's stories. Subscribe and share so the human spirit's flame never goes out.